Good morning and a very warm welcome to everyone to this webinar, which is being hosted by the AIIHPC Special Interest Group on Technology and Palliative Care. Just to briefly introduce myself, I'm Dr. Frances Cleary from Walton Institute in SETU, and I'm the group chair for this special interest group. So the webinar is one of, I suppose, a few of a small number that we're planning to run, allowing colleagues to kind of share their research and their insights and their expertise on specific topics of interest to our network, and to provide kind of an opportunity for participants to ask questions or for very informal discussion, etc. Just to note, the webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Palliative Hub after the event. Secondly, if you'd like to enable the captions, please do so. It's at the bottom of your screen. And also there will be time also at the end for a question and answer time frame, where if you have any questions at all, please add them into the chat as we go, and we'll address them at the end, and Stephen will answer them as best he can. So just to, I suppose, introduce Stephen, our speaker for today. Stephen Barnes is a mixed reality lab manager and senior project manager at Walton Institute and SETU. Stephen has a background in electronic engineering, as well as applied social studies and social care, with postgraduate qualifications in education as well as computing. So Stephen has a very flavoured past. He's worked as a teacher, he's worked in as a social care worker and an engineer prior to delving into the research side in Walton Institute, and he's been working there since 2016 onwards. So he specialises very much in augmented reality and virtual reality technologies, and their applications across multiple different sectors such as healthcare, education, virtual tourism, construction, etc. Just to note, Stephen also works on the European Digital Innovation Hub, which is called Entire. He specialises in design delivery of services to enhance digitalisation for SMEs, businesses, public service organisations and charities in Ireland. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Stephen, who will give you a very, very nice presentation today. Please do, if you have any questions, just a reminder to add them to the chat as we go. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that introduction, Frances. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephen Barnes, so couldn't have been introduced any better. So what I'm here today to do is just to go through virtual and augmented reality, and just to provide an introduction to it and perhaps look at how it could be beneficial to your roles. So what we're covering today, so on the left here we have the topics that I'll be covering, which include demystifying AR and VR, which I would be one of the first people to say there can be quite a lot of confusion over that in terms of what is they do. So I want everyone at the end of today's webinar to be leaving with an understanding of what augmented reality is, what virtual reality is, what the differences are. Now, in order to understand this, we look at use cases for how the technology has been used in different areas, in different industries, and that gives you an understanding of the benefits of it. Then, of course, there will be a focus on introducing the technology. Now, it'll just be giving you an awareness. You won't be leaving today going, oh, I know exactly how this type of technology works or what it is. What I would say is that you will have an awareness of different devices, including the one that may be in your pocket right now, and how that can be used for augmented or virtual reality. Similarly, what I would really like is for people to have an understanding that the technology has to fit the solution. So that's something I will go into in a little while. It's really a case of, my motto is almost not technology for technology's sake, that you need to have a reason for it. And of course, to bring in the precedent for how AR and VR has been used in medicine, to give you an awareness of how it's been used and potential benefits for it. My goal today is that you leave with the outcome that you'll have an idea of how this technology, which is an emerging technology, of course, but how it can be used practically for you, that you might think, oh, this might actually benefit if I introduced it into this particular aspect of what I do as part of my daily life or as part of my work especially. So what I do first of all is just to explain what the terms AR and VR are, because they'll be bandied around quite a lot during this presentation AR refers to augmented reality, which is where you have the real world environment and you have you have virtual information overlaid into that environment. So an example of the devices for that are primarily mobile smartphones and tablet devices. I often use this example, which is probably not the best example of AR. If you were to think of, instead of watching a recording or playback of a sports, you sometimes see golf in particular, where they actually have, you're seeing the footage of somebody about to take a shot, and then you would actually see an overlay of information of where they think the patch should be. It's used a lot in sports, just tennis, golf, soccer, rugby, and things like that. However, what really brought augmented reality into the cultural zeitgeist was Pokemon Go. So again, this is one where people were actually using a mobile app. They were going to different locations and were using augmented reality. It was virtual information was appearing at certain geographic locations. Now, that's kind of an introduction to AR in terms of it's just the kind of very surface level information. What's happened in the last number of years in particular is that we have a little subset of it called mixed reality. And what that has is where you're still perceiving the real world around you, but instead of just an overlay of information, you actually have 3D interactable objects, as you see in this little GIF image here, where the person is actually using basically they're using a mobile phone there, but you can see the world around you, and then there's an overlay of virtual objects such as statues that are placed on surfaces and changing little aspects of your environment. So it's kind of a nice mesh of, you're still seeing the environment around you, but you have an overlay of virtual objects. Sometimes you have things such as the IKEA Place app as well, would be a good aspect of that, where you can go around your room and you can see, well, what if that particular item of furniture would fit into this location? I can see how it would look there. That's an aspect of mixed reality. So that's AR really, but then you have VR, which is virtual reality. What that really refers to, as you can see in the example here that my colleagues in Walton Institute made, where you were completely immersed in a 3D environment. So your sight and sound in particular are you're receiving information from the virtual world. It's really almost removing you from the physical into the virtual. Now, again, you can move around, you can have locomotion as you move in your physical environment that corresponds to movement in the virtual environment. What I would say as well, and certainly with the AR VR team here at Walton Institute, one aspect that we look at as well with that is haptics. Not only do you have the sight and the sound from the virtual, but you also have touch. Another aspect could be if you wanted to introduce smell, scent as well. That can, oh, sorry, music. Sorry, I didn't hear the music there. Sorry, I'll just sorry, I didn't hear the music on my side with the video there. Sorry, I'll just go through. So yeah, the virtual environment is where you, as you can see here, for example, the augmented reality is, I don't know much about image composition so much, but as it was explained to me, is like the foreground is AR, it's just foreground information. When it has some depth, it's the middle ground, that's mixed reality. Whereas virtual reality is where you have the entire range from foreground to background. That includes sorry, that includes aspects such as not only virtual images and sound, but also touch through haptic feedback, as well as the potential to introduce scent as well to that. So you're receiving your information from this from the virtual world there. So AR and VR, how can we sum them up? Now, I don't want to introduce anything that's confusing, but one term that is used quite a lot is XR, extended reality. And what that is really is it's an umbrella term to not only describe the virtual reality and the augmented reality, but anything that goes beyond that in terms of if you have any future interactions or anything like that, holographics as well, collaborative holographics will be considered XR. So with that in mind, you can sometimes be, especially if you were to either read an article or to actually look at a video describing AR and VR, what you would get quite often is you would have a lot of different terms thrown out, such as spatial computing, virtual avatar, digital twin, 360 video. Now, some of them, such as the immersive experience, spatial computing, cross reality, they're just other terms that are used for what we do. Then there's other things such as cave systems and all this. You really don't need to worry about. It's just sometimes companies such as Apple will bring out proprietary names that they're almost trying to change the paradigm of what we understand AR to be. And they say, oh, it's actually called this. But realistically, all you need to know is that AR is augmented reality. It's where you have virtual information in the real world. VR is virtual reality, where you have a complete immersion in the virtual world. You're removed from the physical. And then XR just is virtual reality, augmented reality, and everything else. Any human computer interaction is considered XR. So with that in mind, and again, I just need to make sure, sorry, this here, I just want to make sure that the sound is off for this before I play this video. Because it's not coming through on my side here, but what you have here is people ask, like, kind of, I'm showing off a little bit. This is some of the equipment we have at the Mixed Reality Lab at Walton Institute. And as you can see, there's scanners, there's Omni treadmills, there's different types of headsets, even EEG we use. But that right there is just me just using an iPad, and that can give you an immersive experience as well, as you can see from the video there. But the concept for it is, I always think of it as a spectrum. You don't necessarily need to go all the way from having like a Hollywood type of experience, which we can almost do in the lab at the moment. We have a holographics test bed as well coming to Walton Institute, and they're really they're exceptional, and they can provide one aspect of it, but there's a complete spectrum of experiences when it comes to AR and VR that you can go all the way from just a basic application on a mobile phone all the way to actually people putting on a headset and going into that type of experience. Now, there are some common misconceptions for sure when it comes to AR and VR. One I get asked quite a bit, or one that people seem to assume quite a bit, is it a gimmick? And my honest answer to that is it all depends on what you're trying to do with AR and VR. If it's a marketing tool, then perhaps you're using it in a way that it can be quite gimmicky almost. If you're doing it to show off something, that can look quite cool. Another thing is, however, if you're actually using it for a purpose and the actual application you're using AR and VR for, then it's not a gimmick. It's just something to benefit you. Is it just for games? No, but I must say, and having never worked on a video game or anything like that, and not being a gamer myself, we owe a debt of gratitude. Certainly anyone working in XR, in AR, VR, we owe a debt of gratitude to the gaming industry, because you had the likes of the PlayStation VR, and really what they did was, because they're talking about markets where there was millions and almost $1 billion like of revenue when it comes to trying video games, AAA video games on these platforms. They ironed out a lot of the kinks that we were experiencing 8 years ago when I started. Motion sickness, frame rates, graphical fidelity, being able to use it untethered without a cable connecting you. That all came really from the gaming side of things. So it's not just for games. It kind of started that, and we've seen since then, especially during COVID, it started being used more as a training tool, which I'll discuss in a while too. Is it too expensive? It all depends, because most people will have a smartphone in their pocket, and if it's an iOS, if it's an iPhone or anything, guarantee you could run augmented reality. If it's an Android phone, it may or may not run that. Similarly, I would say when it comes to, even though the video you would have seen there a moment ago of some of the headsets we have in the lab, and we'd have quite expensive high-end ones as well as widely used ones. The most, when it comes to headsets in particular, the most ubiquitously used headset is, and this is from multinational corporations to even research labs to right across basically anyone using AR VR. They use a headset called a Meta Quest 3, and you can actually pick it up in Smiths. It's about €500. So that's kind of like the most commonly used. And how that is as well with the likes of those types of headsets is you don't need a computer to actually run it. It runs standalone. So it has improved a great deal there. Is it going to replace jobs? I don't even know where people thought of that. It's really something I would see as benefiting people, making your job easier, more so than there's no capacity for it to replace your job. Will I get sick trying it? When you talk about people using the mobile devices, absolutely not. When people use the likes of the HoloLenses or the headsets where you have pass through, you can see the room around you. I've never heard of anybody feeling sick using that. However, when you go more towards people trying on virtual reality headsets, which completely enclose their face and they're receiving virtual information and their locomotion, their movements is in the virtual world. There have been people, not as many as there were 8 years ago. They have improved a great deal, but I can't honestly say this. Not every that no one will feel motion sickness. If somebody is prone to the likes of vertigo, that can cause an issue for them. If somebody has photosensitive epilepsy, there may be an issue there also. But it has improved a great deal. But as I said, when you think of AR and VR, you don't necessarily need to think straight away of the headset. It needs to be, okay, in what way, what can I use it for? And as you'll see with a case study in a few moments, that's something where I'll actually be seeing we have to match the technology to the solution, match the technology to the people who need to use it. That's really where it is. Will it take over people's lives? Honestly, at the moment, no. The graphical fidelity would not be to a point where it's a substitute for life. However, I can't honestly say, especially with the digital uptake of the younger generations, that we won't get to a point where people are living their lives virtually. We already see this with message boards and things like that. So I'm not sure going forward. But what I can say is my suggestions would be to view it as an assistive technology. And as I said, always match the technology to the use case, not the use case to the technology. So that's really where it has to be. I'd always see it as if somebody's going to put on a headset, there has to be a good reason for it. And where I'd see it as being is I'd see it as the next step on the evolutions from, especially from a training perspective or from an information sharing perspective, that as you see in the classrooms, we've come a long way from there. So that's where I'd see us. We've gone from blackboards to projectors, video, getting more interactive that way, to the whiteboards, to now you can actually have personalized experiences in it. And that's the other aspect, is how can XR, which is AR and VR, how can that engage people? So it has been seen to be better than certain traditional methods. Certainly with enhanced engagement, you can have people in immersive environments and interactive experiences. So promotes active independent learning, multi-sensory learning. What I'd say is, and again, I'm probably showing my teaching past in this aspect. Um, I follow the VARC model, which is how most people learn and process information. It's either through visual, auditory, read write, or kinesthetic, through movement and through practice. And multisensory learning. A recent study concluded in August 2023, where you had over 1 million people responded to a VARC model survey. 87.6% of them had shown a preference towards kinesthetic, where they're able to actually not just rely on reading a manual or listening to somebody, but actually doing it and practicing it. And XR includes, as I was saying, sight, hearing, touch via haptics, and it creates a holistic learning environment that way. Experiential learning as well. That's one where users can experience scenarios that they wouldn't ordinarily get a chance to do. Collaborative learning. If you think about not only collaborative learning, but collaborations in general, you could have two people in two different geographic locations talking to somebody, a third person, so say a patient, they could actually talk to or interact with the person. If they had the headset on, they could have a remote consultation that way. That's where it can go as well. Personalized education, you can have adaptive content based on the person's level. So you can have teleconferences there as well. So in terms of how it's used, so XR collaborations, as you can see from the first images here, you have people where they are able to view the same virtual model by being in either the same geographic location or different geographic locations. They can interact with it as well. So there's no longer a need for people to be right there together to do this. They can actually virtually be together to do it. We'd also see VR simulators. This is really taken off, especially in pharmaceutical and production industries, where they're trying to teach people how to use certain items of equipment. They no longer have to ring fence resources, whether that's be equipment or whether that be people. People can work on a VR simulation of it, and you also can replicate high risk environments. It also helps that if you think of it from the perspective of you could have somebody practice soft skills, like of how they talk to patients or how they kind of interact with before they would put an IV line in. They could do it virtually a number of times. They're able to replicate that in a safe environment. AR-based manuals is something that's happened quite a bit as well. So as you can see, the top image is really from a person using a HoloLens device where they're like, how do I do this? And you get a step-by-step visual and kinesthetic explanation of how to perform certain tasks. So that's how it's being used a lot. So you have a lot of industries such as everyone from Boeing to Amazon to Mitsubishi right along have been utilizing this. The other aspect of it is remote assistance. This is where, and again, this is not something that is purely for high-end devices. It's not. This is an aspect where you can have somebody actually, a use case could be somebody could be going out in the community and talking to a patient there or talking to somebody, and they need to have a supervisor almost inform them of, okay, don't forget to do this, don't forget to do that. They could have either tablet up or they could have just the glasses on and just be kind of almost annotated in real time. Don't forget to check this first, or this is the next thing you need to do. That's one aspect that you could have with remote assistance, where the person's field of view, as you can see, you don't need somebody to physically come over there. All they need to do is open a web browser on their computer and they can see what the person's doing, and then they can actually annotate their field of view. Like as you can see there with the green arrows, it's like you need to do this, not that. So that's an aspect you have with XR. So of course, then it's a case of AR, VR, and health. So looking at it from palliative care patients, I was looking at a recent study conducted at Winchester University where I was looking at the benefits for virtual reality and augmented reality. So virtual reality provides temporary escapes from pharmacologically resistant pain, those experiences and journeys patients may not access in other ways. So the Munster University Hospital, their study was where they were trying to enable wishes through virtual worlds, where a person could put on a VR headset and virtually visit those locations. It had a very good response. I think there were 12% of people who exhibited discomfort. So when we ask about the kind of the sickness there, but 80% noted that they would use it again and they enjoyed the experience, while 5%, and this was something that I certainly need to be cognizant of, is that it made them sad. They became aware of old memories and opportunities that are now gone. On the other side of things, you have AR, augmented reality, where it can provide remote communication with family members, so it can actually have 3D presence. So say, for example, if they had family which were in a different country or were unable to visit due to, of course, what we saw during the pandemic in particular, they could actually have a telepresence where they can actually talk to each other, and it's beyond a Zoom call. There's 3D presence there. So that's the patient center. This image here actually on the right is one that will lead right into the next slide. That's taken Kirklow Beach. It's part of our Nature Walker application. So just to tell you, Nature Walker, and again, not in any way kind of tooting our own horn or anything, but it's a project that I think is of relevance to us. It's one where it was very much a case of matching the technology to the use case, not the other way around. What happened was it was a collaboration with Wexford Mental Health Services, Sports Active Wexford, and ourselves. The aims were to give people the opportunity to virtually visit a park or scene of natural beauty without necessarily being there. To as well, another aspect was to encourage user participation in physical activity. Now, the latter is certainly something that we did focus on, but we did find that through the workshops we had with the occupational therapists, the need was to have greater inclusion, so that we actually had people who were physically unable to visit those locations, that they would then have almost a stationary type of experience with us. Our target audience was people with anxiety or anxiety issues or other psychological impairments that prevent them from physically visiting the area of interest. So of course, like I was looking at Vygotsky's zone of proximal development as an issue where we could scaffold, especially for people with anxiety disorder, where it's like, okay, we want to get them familiarize themselves with the virtual trails multiple times before they then get to a point where they can physically go there and they know what to expect. Feedback from the circus, from focus groups, and this is something actually that I would emphasize, really kind of changed our view, was not only was it a case of the features that were specified by the focus group were perhaps different to what we were initially anticipating. So we're really cutting down the tech side of things to suit us. We wanted to run on everyone's devices. So even though initially we were thinking of high-end augmented reality, things like that, we said no. So we end up using 360-degree cameras, taking that footage, and then adding features where a person's movement will correlate to their actual movement in their own safe space. Or sound was something that came up a lot from the focus group, where they specified that the sound was just as important, if not more important, than the visuals. So we're very fortunate. We have a postdoctoral researcher, Dr. Christina O'Loughlin, who was able to work on that with us. One thing that was noted as well was that the Psychiatry for Later Life in Walnut Grove and Wexford, they have been using this as well for some of their patients, so that they can actually see and experience a walk in the woods that they would be unable to do otherwise. So just by George, just as a last slide really is just, I know I've been very much talking about the patient-centered side of things, which is something I really wanted to focus on, but also VR training in healthcare. So again, going back to like, how can we use it as a training tool? AR and VR can be used as this. If you look at the learning experiences, can be repeated, and specific tasks can be practiced quite a lot. You have the likes of also VR, who have really specialized in surgical training in VR, but also we've seen a lot more with the soft skills. University of Connecticut Health, they've really focused on more of the soft skills development in virtual reality. The one aspect is performances can be monitored quantitatively, so that this is an aspect where if a person is doing training in AR or VR, you can actually build up a profile of that person's performance, not just the time it takes for them to do tasks. You don't need a qualitative assessment of somebody being there. Now, as important as that is for a person using their tacit knowledge to do that, they can review the recordings of a person's virtual training, but also the virtual training can specify things such as how long did it take them to do certain tasks? Did they do certain tasks and then change? how decisive were they? Were there mistakes? Things like that. And also be able to build a profile of how a person has learned over time. The other aspect is it's really taking it from a manual or from the kind of the traditional kind of classroom kind of methods or kind of like the peer education that way to really bring out something that promotes independent learning, so you can replicate real world scenarios in risk-free environments. And the University of Connecticut study found that it was 570% virtual training was 570% faster and better than traditional learning in terms of people retaining information and being able to complete certain tasks. So that's it for me, really. Just to go over for any questions, but please feel free to contact me should you wish to at any time.
Great. Thanks so much, Stephen. That's a really, really insightful overview of, I suppose, the differences between augmented reality and virtual reality, because they both in their own technology, let's just say, have different potentials, different applications that can be applied across. I think a key point that you raised and was quite evident throughout your presentation there was that the matching of the technologies to the use cases and it being as an assistive technology. And that's something that keeps coming up in the special interest group, where it's more or less it's a supporting technology. How does it actually help? And especially in palliative care, because it's a very sensitive kind of domain for the patients or the residents. So how can it really, really be impactful? So it's very, very important, I suppose, to focus in on the co-creation element, co-design element for such technologies if you're pushing them through.